Now, if you want to think about how these lines work functionally, they really go across the body from the shoulder girdle to the pelvic girdle. And so what I want to do now is extend these arm lines into the functional lines, which show you the connections across the body between the girdles. So we'll have a front functional line and a back functional line. So what we're talking about here is an extension of the arm line, the superficial arm line in this case, that we're coming down from this whole superficial arm line, but I'm just going to start here. Let's just start here with the pectoralis major muscle. That muscle comes down, interdigitates with the upper fibers of the external oblique, comes down just about beside the rectus and down here into, as you can see in the slide, right down onto the pubic bone. But look what happens if we keep going. Keep going in the same direction, and as you can see, we get right onto the adductor longus, and the adductor longus goes behind the leg and ties to the linea aspera on the back side of the femur, right in there. See? So you have a tie-in from the right shoulder to the inner part of the left leg. It makes a lot of sense. Imagine you're a pitcher in a baseball game. You wind up. When you pitch with the right hand, but you use the left leg for support. You pivot around that left leg to get the full force with your right arm. Well, it makes a lot of sense now in terms of this myofascial meridian coming down from the right shoulder, across the pubic bone, and deep into the left leg. You can't go any farther with this because when you get down to the end of the adductor longus, you're in that linea aspera in the back part of the leg, and there are lots of other fasciae crossing over in other directions, so that has to be the end of this line, right where that big, strong adductor longus attaches into the back of the femur. Obviously, there is an equal but opposite line going down the other leg. But if you think about it, one of those lines is bound to be stronger than the other depending on what handed you are. If you're not ambidextrous, if you're using your right arm more than your left, especially in something like tennis or any sport that's handed, you're going to see differences in these lines from one side to the other. So the front functional line comes from the arm lines of one shoulder down across the chest, across the belly, crossing the midline of the pubic bone, into the adductors of the opposite leg, so that each shoulder is joined to the opposite hip. Okay, there is a similar corresponding line, functional line, in the back that goes, let's detach these lines here, that goes from the latissimus attachment, we could say, for starters, although we could pick up the teres in there, but if we use the latissimus, we might pick up the little bit of the scapula there with the latissimus. That happens in some people, not in others. And that would take us down to the middle of the thoracico-lumbar fascia. We cross right over that fascia as it crosses over the body and down through the sacral fascia. And we pick up what? Well, we've picked up the same muscle, the gluteus maximus, but these are the superior fibers that go into the iliotibial band, but now we're on the inferior or sacral fibers that go underneath the iliotibial band on to the gluteal attachment 1/3 of the way down the shaft of the femur. So you can see we're stabilizing across to here, similarly as to the other side. But you know what? It doesn't stop here. What happens if we keep going around the leg underneath the iliotibial band? What muscle would we get to? That's right, the vastus lateralis comes right down in the same direction. That outermost one of the quadriceps comes down, picks up the kneecap, as we talked about before, and ends right here on the tibial tuberosity, and I suppose we could carry it down into the foot, but this will do for now. What I'd like you to notice here is that once again, the shoulder is stabilized to the opposite leg, in this case to the femur and to the knee. So if you consider that in terms of a backhand, here I go, the line goes up the back of the arm, connects into the latissimus, goes across the latissimus to the opposite leg and around to the knee. That's quite a long line. That's the line that you would use in a backhand shot in tennis. It would also be the line that you would break, I mean B-R-A-K-E, slow down the motion if you were doing the pitch. You'd be using the front line to create the pitch and using that functional line in the front, but the line in the back that we just looked at would be stopping that motion, keeping you from throwing the joints out of place. So that line would come down across the back again and over onto the opposite leg. The same thing, I suppose, would be true for the backhand. Once you got to the limit of the backhand, this front line would be the break. That would stop you from going too far and damaging the joints. But you see these lines going really across the body. That's where you get the functional connections, the things that really make the body integrate and work as a piece of movement. So the back functional line likewise joins the arm lines, but this time across the back of the rib cage, the thoracicolumbar fascia, the sacral fascia onto the gluteus maximus, the vastus lateralis, right around to the tibial tuberosity, thus joining the shoulder to the hip across the back.